Papua New Guinea is made up of over 800 different language groups. It's a beautiful little nation just above Australia, and each little population group has their own culture, their own beliefs, and their own accepted norms. Now, in addition to that, there are some commonalities among the different PNG communities, and an awareness of these characteristics can help us understand the best approach when working with people from this culture. So I want to have a look at some of the different aspects of their culture, beginning with the collective society that they have. Unlike many Western societies where we focus more on the individual, Papua New Guineans, Melanesian communities place a high value on the family unit, the extended family, the clan, and the tribe. For example, uncles and aunties are also regarded as fathers and mothers. Sometimes they're called small father, small mother. In a similar way, cousins are viewed as brothers and sisters, not like a first cousin or second cousin and so on, but as actual blood brothers and sisters. Here's a really interesting one. In-laws are highly respected. Unlike Western nations where typically we might make fun of our in-laws or tell mother-in-law jokes and that type of thing, they would never do that. They refer to their in-laws by a special title, sometimes Tambu or Naki, depending on the language group, and they're never addressed by their first name. It's a tremendous sign of respect and reflects just the value of their family unit and the extended family. The elderly are honoured and respected. The younger members of the groups always take care of the elderly, whereas we would tend to very often put our elderly into a nursing home as an expression of care and love where they can be looked after. That's a total foreign concept to these communities. The elderly are loved and respected, and their advice and direction is sought after. Gender roles. In some communities, women are the landowners and distribute land to family members, whereas in many of the other communities, the men are the landowners and distribute land. Men still commonly, in some communities, practice polygamy, where they have more than one wife. The leadership structures are very much so along the male side. The chiefs and the clan leaders and the firstborn males are usually the primary decision makers for the collective. However, sometimes friends and family members are very often consulted when problems arise. So it's not the individual so much, but often the whole group and the family are involved in the decision-making process. Families and clans are very protective. Tensions can escalate quickly sometimes if members are threatened or harmed. And they have this concept of payback system. So if somebody has been hurt or even killed, other family members and clan members will pay back on not necessarily the person that's inflicted that wound or that hurt or that death, but any member or relative of that person that's considered to be an accepted practice, and it can go backwards and forwards. And the only way to stop this process is to have what they call a reconciliation ceremony. The common pathway to ceasing hostilities. It usually involves a long meeting and discussion in which they seek forgiveness, and it's often followed by some form of compensation, and then a feast where sometimes many pigs are killed and they cook all kinds of garden food and they sit around and tell stories and reconcile with one another. Time. When we talk about time in Papua New Guinean cultures, there is little or no consciousness of time in many of the PNG communities, and punctuality is not significant. Meetings, for example, seldom start or finish on time, and when they have a meeting, every person has input into the discussion, and there's no time constraint given at all. They have this little phrase called PNG time, which simply means that they just turn up in their own time, and it's not necessarily a rude thing. It's just a typical reflection of their value on time. It's all about the relationship and not so much about the time. Bride price ceremonies and other ceremonies have a very big value in their community and in forming relationships among families. So a bride price, you can see a picture there. The groom's side typically will give these great gifts to the bride's side, and the bride's side will actually give some as well. And when this exchange takes place, it's like the forming of a contract, and it's in some ways compensating the wife's family for the loss of the wife or the woman, and it's saying that the groom's side will look after her and take care of her. Funerals are a major communal event. I should just add, bride prices are far more significant than a wedding. A wedding is actually a very informal thing in many ways. Funerals are a major communal event. Family and friends gather for 5 or 6 days in what they call a house cry, where they'll come together, they'll share food, they'll cry and reminisce and tell stories and laugh and joke and mourn together until the actual funeral burial takes place. Very, very long process. Another interesting one, when they build a house, it's often a communal project. There's no necessarily set time frame. Things are often done piecemeal. There's no set budget. It's about the family building together. And even the concept of maintenance, often they'll simply let the house become dilapidated, and when it needs to be renewed, they'll pull it down and start again. And again, no time frame. It's all about the family and the extended family working together. When they share information, things are passed on typically orally with their traditions and beliefs. However, some of those things are being lost as they transition and change in their culture a little. The present moment is most important to many Melanesian cultures. There's not always so much planning towards the future. There's a routine of rhythms and life cycles, building garden, making houses, getting married and that sort of thing. Very interesting. When it comes to sharing information, sometimes it's withheld. Sometimes there's a story behind the story. Situations and circumstances are difficult to understand unless you've got this significant amount of background information. And sometimes they'll give not quite the correct answer to a question. And it's not so much that they're lying as such. It's more a case of they're just wanting to please the person and not see them disappointed. With regards to trust is usually built over time. The community want to know what your intentions are. They'll usually be very friendly and non-judgmental, but if they discern your intentions are not for the greater good of the community, trust won't be established. If deep trust is established, you can actually be welcomed into a family through a special initiation ceremony and become like a blood family member or relative. Now, I want to talk for a moment about spirituality. Many communities in Papua New Guinea still place a high value in their spiritual traditions. These days, they place a high value in Christianity and their faith across the different Christian faith traditions, ranging from the Protestant through to the Catholic faith communities. And the church is very often the hub of the community. Sometimes you'll get syncretism where they will embrace Christianity but also retain elements of their traditional faith. Witchcraft is still very common in many areas and communities where it's either practiced or feared. Many changing values, particularly along the coastal regions where predominantly the cities are, some in the highlands as well, where Western values and beliefs, along with materialism and modernisation and urbanisation, are influencing their communities. The influence of Christianity has really raised the value of women and children, far more respect and embracing of the value of humanity. In line with that, women are beginning to oppose their husbands who desire to practice polygamy. This can be a complicated process, as you might imagine, and very often creates an inner conflict within the individual. Now, just some things to reflect upon as you might initially be building some relationship with people from Papua New Guinea or a Melanesian culture. Men and women don't greet each other typically with a kiss like we would do in our Western society and culture. Handshakes are quite acceptable. Sometimes you might see men holding hands as an expression of friendship. And they usually maintain eye contact during the conversation. Some helpful way to build bridges is simply to let the person teach you about their culture. As I mentioned early on in the presentation, there's over 800 different little cultures within that political nation. Just be honest and understanding and seek clarification. Allow them to tell stories. They're great storytelling people. And just slow the process down and take time to build rapport and trust. Be non-judgmental and aware of our own prejudices and biases, and be curious, but not too curious, otherwise it will become all about you and not them. Just be mindful of being ethnocentric and looking through the lens of our own culture. Things that we might consider to be normal may not be normal for them. And of course, we need to be empathic and respectful, be genuine and sincere. And being congruent in these things will help develop the trust in the relationship. And also we need to just be humble, have an awareness of our own beliefs and values, our strengths and limitations, without feeling the need that we somehow need to be superior. And just remember that it's two people together on a journey. We can cultivate resilience and determine to work with the person's needs and to grow stronger as a result of any unexpected challenge. We just need to be wise, exercise sound judgment, use our counselling skills wisely, exercise unconditional positive regard, and just accept the person with all their frailties, their strengths, and their weaknesses. And finally, there's lots of helpful resources. Interestingly, much of the research useful resources have been created by missionaries. They've lived there for many years and studied in their adopted cultures over very long periods. One that I use is called Anthropology for Christian Witness. It's a textbook authored by Professor Charles Kraft, who served at Fuller Theological Seminary in the United States. So I'll recommend that one as a resource for understanding Melanesian cultures, and also just to look for, because there's so many different tribal groups in that nation, often the best place to start looking is for people who have lived there, which are typically missionaries, and have an understanding of that individual culture that you may be working with. A general broad brushstroke is this resource here that I've just mentioned. Well, I hope you find that helpful, and thank you for listening.